The Battle of Calcinato was fought on the 19th of April 1706 near Calcinato, Italy, during the War of the Spanish Succession, between the forces of Bourbon France and Spain and those of the Austrian Habsburgs. It ended in a victory from Marshal Vendôme's French and Spanish army. Prelude. In Italy, the 1706 campaign had, as before, two branches: the contest for Piedmont and the contest between the French forces in Lombardy and the Austrian Second Army that sought to join Victor Amadeus and Starhemberg in Piedmont. The latter, repulsed by Vendôme at Cassano, had retired to Brescia and Lake Garda. Vendôme following up and wintering about Castiglione and Mantua. The battle. On the 19th of April 1706, Marshal Vendôme marched on the imperial positions at Montechiari and Calcinato, which had posted themselves in well-defended but distant positions, with the latter segment of the Prussian imperial army separated from the forces near Montechiari by a distance of 3 leagues, with the intention of taking the enemy forces by surprise, and with Prince Eugene nicely separated from his men. Reventlow left in temporary command. Vendôme had in the days prior feigned sickness to delay Eugene's return, and preceding the battle marched by the cover of night to surprise the enemy. Arriving at the Canal de l'Artois, Vendôme at daybreak pushed the advance guard of the Imperialists beyond the canal, and in doing so captured a dragoon who reported upon the weak left flank of the Imperialist forces. The Vendôme was now in a position to move his forces to isolate and overwhelm the enemy, allowing him to breach the nearly impenetrable posts the Imperialists had constructed for themselves, thus having secured in the early morning the bulk of his infantry on the Calcinato side of the canal. Employing a number of hastily constructed bridges to do so, he posted 200 cavalry to possess a hill just beyond the village. However, the Imperialists, noticing this at sunrise, dispatched the entirety of their horsemen to the same spot, and having driven the French cavalry from the position secured it as their own, allowing 8 battalions of Imperialist infantry to reach and reinforce the hill before the Marshal could mount his attack. The French assault finally began that day, with the march of Vendôme's infantry upon the enemy positions. Passing ditches in the presence of enemy fire, the French pushed into a melee on the Imperialist right wing, throwing it into disorder. Similarly, the French bore the charge of the Imperialist left wing without firing a single piece, and fell upon it in turn. The latter charged, supported by Count Reventlow and the Imperial cavalry, in which he instilled the due vigor with which to do battle, inflicted some damage upon the French right, but the continual refreshment of troops to Vendôme's army, and the artillery support he had provided himself, brought the entirety of the Imperial army to eventually rout, allowing the capture of Calcinato. Having taken the Imperialist positions, Marshal Vendôme acted quickly to take advantage of the disarray into which he had forced his enemy, and skirmished with them past the river Cheese, sending many of the Imperialist forces routing to Resato. Similarly, he deployed components of his army to Salo and Gavardo, resulting in an Imperialist rout to the mountains beyond. Many of the retreating Imperial components were not recovered for quite some time, with Prince Eugene's arrival at the scene of the battle offering him a reasonable level of difficulty in the task of reorganizing the remnants of Reventlow's forces. Casualties. Numbers concerning French casualties vary, but it's generally agreed that the Imperialists lost 6,000 infantry, with at least 3,000 of those as prisoners to the French, 1,000 horses or more, 6 pieces of cannon, 25 colors, and 12 standards. Due to the triumphant nature of the victory, the battle was suitably revered by King Louis XIV, who wrote, in a letter to Cardinal D'Onofrio, that he could not hope for a more happy and glorious advantage at the beginning of this campaign than that which my cousin the Duke of Vendôme has signally obtained in Italy. Aftermath. Vendôme was sent to Flanders after the crushing defeat there in the Battle of Ramillies. As a result of the disastrous siege of Turin, the French position in Italy deteriorated drastically, and by the end of the year, all French forces had been chased from Italy.